The laughter hit me before the words did. It echoed through the lavish ballroom, ricocheting off the crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors, until it felt like it was pressing against my chest. I froze, my fingers tightening around the champagne flute I hadn't even tasted. "She's trash," the bride's voice rang out, loud enough to cut through the music and conversation, slicing the room into silence. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her, but then her friends giggled behind perfectly manicured hands, and the weight of her words crashed over me like cold water. My face burned, not from the champagne I hadn't sipped, but from the dozens of eyes now darting toward me. Curious, pitying, some even entertained. I wanted to melt into the floor, to vanish into the sea of white tablecloths and floral arrangements. My chest tightened, every shallow breath catching on the humiliation that clawed at my throat. I wasn't part of this world of silk gowns and glittering jewelry, and she had just reminded everyone of it. My instinct screamed at me to run, to find a corner, a restroom, anywhere I could hide my shame. But my heels felt glued to the marble. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears when a sudden, sharp sound broke through, the metallic scrape of a microphone being lifted from its stand. I glanced toward the stage, and there he was, the CEO, his gaze locked onto mine, unreadable yet magnetic, and he raised the mic to his lips. The room held its breath the moment his voice came through the speakers, deep and steady, commanding attention like gravity itself. "Enough," he said, and even the chandeliers seemed to vibrate with the weight of that single word. The bride froze, her smirk faltering as every guest turned their eyes to the stage. I stood rooted in place, my heart racing, wondering if he was about to scold me, or worse, agree with her. But then he scanned the crowd, his jaw tight, and his gaze found mine again, softer this time, almost protective. "That woman you just insulted," he continued, his voice echoing through the vast hall, "is the woman I love." Gasps rippled across the room, a wave of shock that crashed over the whispers and left a stunned silence in its wake. I felt the air leave my lungs, my body trembling with disbelief. Heat flooded my face, not from shame now, but from the raw intensity of his words. For a heartbeat, I thought I must have imagined it. The CEO, the man whose life was worlds away from mine, had just declared it for everyone to hear. Guests exchanged looks, some scandalized, others fascinated, as if they were watching a scene from a drama unfold in real life. The bride's hand twitched around her bouquet, knuckles white, her composure cracking in real time. My chest swelled with a confusing mix of terror and something dangerously close to hope. He wasn't done. He stepped closer to the edge of the stage, the microphone still in his hand, his eyes never leaving mine. "And if anyone here has a problem with that," he said, voice sharper now, "they can leave." The silence that followed was deafening, like the world had stopped spinning just to witness this moment. My hands shook, and I had to fight the instinct to cover my face, to shield myself from the stares that now burned for a different reason. I could feel the shift in the air, curiosity, shock, and something that almost felt like awe. Slowly, he stepped down from the stage, each click of his polished shoes against the marble echoing through the hall. The crowd parted for him without a word, as if some invisible force compelled them to. My breath caught as he approached me, his presence towering, magnetic, and terrifying all at once. He stopped just a step away, close enough that I could see the reflection of the chandelier lights in his dark eyes. Then, in a voice low enough for only me to hear, yet heavy with certainty, he said, "I told you before, you never have to bow your head to anyone here." My heart thundered against my ribs, and for a fleeting second, the room, the whispers, even the bride's stunned expression all faded away. It was just him and me in a world where, for once, I wasn't invisible. He straightened and turned to the guests again, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "If this wedding needs someone to call trash," he said coldly, letting his gaze sweep the hall, "it's the ones who think status gives them the right to humiliate others." A few gasps broke the stillness, and the bride's face turned a shade of crimson that matched the roses in her bouquet. My pulse roared in my ears. I knew this was only the beginning. The bride's bouquet slipped from her fingers, landing on the marble with a dull thud that seemed to echo louder than the music ever had. Her perfect smile was gone, replaced by a mask of fury and disbelief. "You love her," she spat, her voice trembling as she pointed a shaking finger at me. The murmurs among the guests grew louder, a wave of gossip rippling through the hall like wildfire. I could feel my chest tightening, the urge to run bubbling up, but his hand brushed mine for the briefest moment, grounding me. The bride's mother stepped forward, her pearls glinting under the chandelier, her face contorted with scandalized rage. "Do you even understand what you're saying?" she hissed at the CEO, her voice sharp enough to slice glass. "This is our family's wedding, and you are humiliating us in front of everyone." His expression didn't flinch. He stood there like a man carved from stone, unmovable, unshakable. "No," he said, voice calm but carrying across the room with quiet power. "I'm not humiliating you. I'm stopping the humiliation you allowed." Gasps and whispers fluttered like startled birds through the guests, some scandalized, others secretly thrilled by the drama unfolding before their eyes. My heart pounded so hard it hurt, and I couldn't decide if I was terrified or free. His hand found mine openly now, his fingers curling around mine as if daring anyone to try to pull us apart. For the first time that night, I felt a flicker of something stronger than fear, a spark of defiance I didn't know I had. And that spark only grew when the bride's voice broke into a scream that shook the hall. "You've ruined everything!" the bride screamed, her voice shrill enough to pierce through the symphony that had long stopped playing. Her heels clicked furiously as she stomped toward us, each step echoing like a drumbeat of rage. I instinctively flinched, my grip tightening around his hand, but he didn't move. He was an unshakable wall between her fury and me. "You dare embarrass me at my own wedding!" she spat, her face blotched red, eyes wild with disbelief. "You bring trash into this hall and call it love!" The words stabbed at me, sharper than before, but this time I didn't lower my gaze. His hand tightened around mine, steady and unyielding, and his voice came like a low thunder that silenced the hall once again. "Enough," he said, the single word resonating with a weight that made even the bride stop mid-step. "The only one embarrassing themselves here is you." The guests' murmur swelled, some gasping, others whispering furiously behind fans and champagne glasses. The bride trembled with rage, her hands clenched into fists, and for a moment I thought she might strike me. But he shifted slightly, his body shielding mine completely, his sharp gaze locking onto hers. "If you dare touch her again," he said slowly, his tone a lethal calm, "you will regret it for the rest of your life." The room seemed to inhale as one, the tension so thick it felt like the air had weight. For the first time, the bride faltered, stepping back with a mix of fear and humiliation. My heart pounded, and I realized everyone in that room was watching, waiting to see who I would become in this moment. My knees trembled, but I forced myself to take a step forward, no longer hiding behind him. Every eye in the ballroom followed me, the tension so thick that even the chandeliers seemed to hold their light a little tighter. The bride's chest rose and fell in shallow, angry breaths, and her mascara had begun to smudge, the perfect image of the day unraveling in front of everyone. I swallowed hard, my voice shaking at first, but growing stronger with each word. "I've been called a lot of things in my life," I said, my gaze locked on hers. "But tonight, I finally understood something. What you call trash is just a woman you can't break." Gasps rippled through the hall, and the bride's jaw fell open, stunned into silence. The CEO's hand brushed the small of my back, silent but steady, as if telling me to keep going. "I didn't come here to take anything from you," I continued, my voice clearer now. "I came because he asked me to, because he sees me for who I really am. And after tonight, so will all of you." The murmurs rose again, a mix of shock and reluctant admiration, the tide of the room shifting under the weight of my words. The bride's hands trembled, and she took a step back, her power over the room slipping like sand through her fingers. For the first time all night, I felt something new bloom in my chest, pride, raw and unfamiliar. And in that fragile moment of triumph, I realized this wasn't just about love. It was about finally refusing to be invisible. The ballroom doors burst open with a heavy thud that silenced the whispers in an instant. Every head turned as an older man in a perfectly tailored suit strode in, his presence like a sudden storm. I recognized him immediately. The bride's father, the man everyone in the city whispered about, but no one dared to cross. His sharp eyes scanned the room, taking in the toppled bouquet, the stunned guests, and finally landing on me, still standing in the center with the CEO's hand resting protectively at my back. The weight of his gaze made my chest tighten, a silent judgment that could crush a lesser soul. "What is going on here?" he demanded, his voice a low thunder that vibrated through the marble floor. The bride rushed to his side, her voice breaking into sobs. "Papa, he humiliated me. He chose her. He said he loves her in front of everyone." Her words hung in the air, poisonous and trembling, as though she expected him to restore her shattered pride with a single command. But the CEO didn't move, his hand firm against me like an unspoken promise. "Yes," he said clearly, his voice calm but resolute. "I said exactly that, and I will say it again if I must." A wave of shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd, bouncing against the gilded walls like a chain reaction. The bride's father's face darkened, the kind of darkness that promised war. He took one deliberate step forward, his shoes echoing like a gavel striking judgment, and I realized this was no longer just about humiliation. This was a declaration of battle for love, power, and respect. The bride's father stopped only a few feet from us, his presence sucking the air from the room. "You dare humiliate my daughter in front of all these people," he said, his voice smooth but laced with steel. "You think a declaration of love excuses this disgrace?" I felt his glare burn through me, sharp as a blade. My instinct screamed to lower my head, to retreat into the shadows where I'd always hidden, but the warmth of the CEO's hand at my back kept me grounded. He took a step forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with me, his posture radiating unshakable authority. "The only disgrace tonight," he said, his voice calm but resonant, "is that your daughter thought she could publicly humiliate my wife and get away with it." Gasps erupted, bouncing like waves across the ballroom. The father's jaw clenched, his fists curling slightly at his sides. "Your wife," he repeated, as if the word itself was an insult. "You threw away alliances, reputation, everything this family has built for her?" He gestured toward me with a sharp, dismissive wave, and I felt the sting of his contempt even without his hand touching me. The CEO's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, the room seemed to vibrate with the tension between the two men. "I didn't throw anything away," he said slowly, each word precise, like a blade finding its mark. "I chose the only thing that actually matters, and that's standing right next to me." The crowd murmured again, split between shock and something that felt dangerously close to admiration. And for the first time, the father hesitated, his authority cracking under the weight of the CEO's unshaken resolve. The father's hesitation was brief, but I caught it, a flicker in his eyes, the first sign that the power in the room was shifting. He scanned the faces of the guests, searching for support, but what he found was a sea of uncertainty. Some avoided his gaze entirely, while others whispered behind their hands, their curiosity and awe outweighing their loyalty. My chest rose and fell in shaky breaths, but I refused to step back. For the first time in my life, I felt the courage to stand where I belonged, at his side. The father's lips curled into a tight sneer. "You've made your choice," he said, his voice carrying like a sentence. "But choices have consequences. If you walk out of here with her, you walk out of this family. Forever." My heart stuttered, the the finality of his words, like ice in my veins. I glanced up at the CEO, expecting a flicker of doubt, a shadow of hesitation, but there was none. His hand slid into mine openly, his fingers firm and warm, his gaze locked on mine with an intensity that stole my breath. Then he turned back to the father, his voice ringing clear and unshaken. "Then consider it done," he said. A wave of gasps rippled through the ballroom, followed by an electric silence that felt alive. He squeezed my hand gently and leaned closer to whisper, just for me, "We don't need their world to build our own." My chest tightened, and I realized something life-changing in that moment. For the first time, I wasn't afraid to be chosen and to choose him back. The chandelier light reflected off the marble floor as we turned toward the exit, hand in hand, every step heavy with the weight of defiance. Behind us, the hall was a battlefield of silence and scattered whispers. I could feel the bride's eyes boring into my back, her fury like a dagger she couldn't throw. Just as we reached the towering double doors, her voice cut through the air, sharp and trembling. "You'll regret this," she cried, the sound cracking with a mix of anger and desperation. I froze for a heartbeat, but he didn't. His stride was steady, his grip on my hand a silent command to keep moving. The doors creaked as he pushed them open, and the night air rushed in, cool and liberating, a stark contrast to the suffocating ballroom. For the first time that evening, I breathed deeply. The sky was painted with city lights, and somewhere in the distance, traffic hummed like a reminder that life existed outside that golden cage. He stopped just outside the threshold, turning to face me fully for the first time since everything erupted. His dark eyes searched mine, softening in a way no one else would ever see. "I meant every word," he said quietly, his voice now free of the echo of microphones and chandeliers. "You're the woman I love, and I will never let anyone make you feel small again." My chest ached as emotions I had buried for years threatened to spill over. In that fragile, luminous moment, I realized that walking out with him didn't feel like losing a family. It felt like finally choosing myself. Just as we stepped into the cool night air, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed behind us. I turned instinctively, my pulse quickening, and saw the bride's father storming through the doorway, his face red with a fury that could ignite the night. "You think you can just walk away?" he barked, his voice booming against the stone walls outside the hall. "Do you have any idea what this means for you? For her?" His finger jabbed toward me like an accusation, like I was a crime he couldn't erase. My throat tightened, and for a split second the old instinct to shrink, to disappear, clawed at me again. But the CEO didn't flinch. He stepped slightly in front of me, his presence solid and unmovable. "I know exactly what this means," he said, his voice calm but carrying an edge that could cut glass. "It means I choose her, even if it costs me everything you think matters." The father's mouth opened, ready to unleash another torrent of rage, but the CEO raised a hand, stopping him cold. "No threats, no bargains," he said firmly. "You had your chance to show decency tonight. Instead, you showed me why leaving this behind is the best choice I'll ever make." The night air seemed to thrum with the finality of his words. The father's glare shifted to me, full of venom and disbelief, but this time I didn't lower my gaze. I met his eyes with a quiet strength that surprised even me. For the first time, he looked unsure, like he had lost control of a game he thought he owned. The father's face twisted, caught between fury and disbelief, but the silence that followed was heavier than his threats. Guests had started to spill from the ballroom, gathering behind the open doors like spectators at the edge of a stage. Their whispers floated in the night air, curiosity, pity, awe, but none dared step closer. I felt the chill of the evening breeze against my skin, yet there was a warmth in my chest I hadn't known in years. Slowly, I stepped out from behind the CEO, surprising even myself. My voice wavered only for the first syllable, then grew steady. "You can hate me," I said, looking the father straight in the eye. "You can call me nothing, call me trash, try to erase me, but it won't change who I am or how he feels." My words hung there, fragile yet defiant, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. The father's lips pressed into a thin line, his pride bruised in front of the very people he once commanded. The CEO's hand slipped into mine, warm and steady, as he spoke the words that sealed the night. "We're done here," he said quietly, but the finality in his tone was thunder. He led me down the marble steps, past the stunned guests, into the waiting car that shimmered under the city lights. As the driver pulled away, I caught one last glimpse of the hall, the golden chandeliers glowing in the distance. My chest swelled with a mix of fear and exhilaration. For the first time, I wasn't walking away from something. I was walking toward a life where I was truly seen. The city lights blurred past the car windows as we drove in silence, the weight of everything that had happened pressing against my chest. My fingers were still entwined with his, and I could feel the steady warmth of his palm grounding me in this new, terrifying, exhilarating reality. My reflection in the glass looked like someone else, someone braver, someone who had just left an entire world behind. He finally broke the silence, his voice low and steady. "I know tonight was a lot," he said, glancing at me with those dark, unreadable eyes. "You didn't deserve any of it. Not the words, not the stares, not the slap of their judgment." My throat tightened as his words sank in, and the memory of the ballroom threatened to bring tears I refused to shed. "I've spent my whole life trying not to be seen," I whispered almost to myself, "because every time I was it hurt." He squeezed my hand, gently drawing my gaze to his. "Then let them see you now," he said. "See the woman I chose. See the woman I love." My chest ached, a strange mixture of fear and relief flooding through me. The hum of the city outside was a lullaby to the storm still swirling inside my heart. For the first time, the idea of being seen didn't terrify me, it felt like freedom. I turned to face him fully, the distant glow of streetlights softening his sharp features. "You really meant it," I murmured, my voice trembling with fragile hope. He nodded once, his eyes holding mine like an unspoken vow. "Every word," he said. The car slowed as we crossed the bridge, the river beneath reflecting the scattered lights of the city like 1,000 tiny stars. I pressed my forehead lightly against the cool window, letting the hum of the engine and the rhythmic thud of my own heartbeat settle my nerves. "I don't know what comes next," I admitted softly, my voice barely rising above the quiet. I walked away from everything familiar tonight. Even if it was cruel, it was all I knew. He didn't hesitate. His hand left mine only to rest over my trembling fingers in my lap, steady and reassuring. "You didn't walk away from anything that mattered," he said, his tone calm but firm. "You left behind their expectations, their chains. And now you get to decide who you are without their voices drowning you out." I turned to face him, my chest tight with the weight of his words. "I've never been allowed to decide anything for myself," I whispered, my eyes stinging. "Then start now," he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Start by believing me when I say I love you. Not because it's convenient, not because it's expected, but because I can't imagine my world without you in it." My breath caught, and for a moment the car, the city, and even time itself seemed to fade away. I leaned back, letting the warmth of his words sink into the places I thought would always stay cold. For the first time in years, I felt like the weight on my shoulders wasn't mine to carry anymore. The car stopped in front of his apartment, the soft glow of the streetlights casting long shadows on the quiet street. He stepped out first, then offered his hand to me like it was the most natural thing in the world, as if guiding me into a new life. My legs trembled as I stood on the pavement, feeling the crisp night air kiss my skin. For a moment, the silence between us was louder than any chaos we had left behind. I glanced up at him, and in his eyes I saw none of the judgment or expectation that had haunted me all night, only a steady warmth that felt like home. He reached up and gently brushed a strand of hair from my face, his thumb lingering near my cheek. "This," he said softly, "is where your story really begins." My chest tightened, a mix of fear and exhilaration coursing through me. "I don't know if I'm ready," I whispered, my voice catching on the edge of vulnerability. He leaned in slightly, his presence both comforting and electrifying. "You don't have to be ready," he said. "You just have to trust that we're in this together." My heart swelled as tears threatened to fall, not from pain this time, but from relief. For the first time in my life, I wasn't running, hiding, or shrinking under someone else's shadow. I was standing still, being seen and being chosen. As we walked inside, hand in hand, I realized that no ballroom, no whispers, and no threats could ever take this away from me. I had stepped into a world where I finally belonged, because he had called me his in front of everyone,